He has been a political pinata with his courageous writing in the New York Times. You love him, you hate him, but all can agree that his absolute foundational wheelhouse is our international economics. He is a lone Nobel Prize winner from Oslo for this analysis of trade patterns and location of economic activity. Paul Krugman, thank you so much for joining us again. Paul, I want to go back to when you were 25 years old. You wrote, it was a joke, but it wasn't. It was a serious idea about time and space and interstellar planets and all that. The final sentence of Krugman at age 25. Those of us working in this field, I'm going to paraphrase, of international economics and trade are still a small band, but we know that the force is with us. Dr. Krugman, where is the force this morning?
This is Professor blowing off steam with a paper about interstellar trade, so what the hell?
Where is the force this morning for this nation?
Oh boy, this is really, really bad. I mean, you want to say this is, we're talking about, if, assuming the Rose Garden, anything like what Trump announced in the Rose Garden is actually going to be where we land, we're talking about tariffs that are significantly higher than Smoot-Hawley, and of course, starting from very low. So this huge jump in tariff rates with a U.S. economy that's 3 times as open to international trade as it was in 1930. So this makes Smoot-Hawley look like a rounding error. And it's, so that's really bad. And it's also, it's highly uncertain. Never had a situation where really you have no idea, but within, like 20 points where the average tariff rate is going to be a few months from now. So this creates an impossible environment for business. It's hard to imagine a worse trade policy than what we're getting.
In the cacophony, Paul Krugman, we have nations acting. Last night at 9:15, I picked up my phone and there was China acting. China just says no. Trump lives on negotiation. Folks, Bloomberg's Tim O'Brien owns the high ground on this. He lives on negotiation. John Bolton, writing in the Telegraph, says he lives on negotiation. If the Chinese don't negotiate, what happens to Paul Krugman's trade economy?
Oh, I mean, starting point here again is that negotiate about what? Now, China, you could conceivably have some. China is not a free trade economy, and they might be able to make some concessions, but they ain't gonna. Their back is up, and they have national pride, and their economy, by some measures, is as big as ours, or bigger. So you don't want to. They're not for moving, and the other players. I mean, think about the Europeans. Europe had an average tariff of about 1.7% on U.S. goods. Has still. About 1.7% on U.S. goods. What can they give? What concessions can they make? It's not as if Trump is asking them to do something, is asking them to remedy some real sin. He's sort of made up a story about how they must be doing something wrong, but they aren't actually. And so they even if he wants concessions, they can't give them.
Professor, I think if we just step back a little bit, I think the basis of the Trump administration tariff policy is that they're trying to reorder the world economic order. Is there something fundamentally broken about the world economic order that disadvantages the U.S.?
Actually, no. I mean, when all is said and done, the U.S. runs an overall trade deficit, but that's mostly because the balance of payments always balances. If you attract inflows of foreign capital, then the math says that you have to have a trade deficit. I know mathematics has a progressive bias, but still, that's what the math says. And the U.S. is an attractive place to invest, or was until now. So the idea that there's something fundamentally wrong just doesn't make sense. And it's worse. I mean, Trump and his people think not only that the U.S. shouldn't run a trade deficit, but that we shouldn't run a trade deficit with any country, that everything should be bilateral balanced trade, which is just crazy. I mean, if you think about people, if you work for somebody else, well, you run a surplus with that person because they pay you and you probably don't spend much of your income on their products.
Right.
On the other hand, you run a bilateral deficit with your supermarket because you buy from them and they don't buy stuff from you. And so, the same applies to countries. So it's just crazy. And I don't know. I think all of this stuff about remaking the international order is window dressing. It's the fundamental thing is Trump wants tariffs. And then everything else is people trying to explain why, retconning explanations of why he wants tariffs.
Yeah, Jason Furman in the FT this morning really writing up this complete focus on getting tariffs in to go back to the 50s, the 30s, or maybe 1905. We welcome Paul Krugman, of course, iconic at Princeton University. You know him from the New York Times. He just went out the door. He has a Substack. It's a value. I got 2 Substacks for you. I got to mention Paul Adam Tooze is killing it out on Substack. But Adam Tooze, subscribe. Paul Krugman, subscribe on Substack as well. We welcome all of you across the nation on YouTube, worldwide, with the laureate, Paul Krugman. Paul?
Professor, is globalization from an economic perspective, is that dying as we see it?
Well, the truth is we don't know, which is part of the problem. This enormous uncertainty. But yeah, we have built up this very integrated world economy with all of these, supply chains and so on, which cannot survive a 23% average U.S. tariff rate. So this is going to really snarl things up.
I think, Paul, that people are understanding the jump condition in tariffs. I'm going to go back to Trump 1. You did a wonkish. Paul, you should read the wonkish Krugman in the Times. You'll age. Paul, you did like a wonkish trade. You got a chart. On the y-axis is price of imports. On the x-axis is the volume of imports. Now with Trump 2, that chart is just shattered. There's no other way to put it. You have a welfare loss. If we explode the price of imports, if we have the volume of imports decrease a lot, slower real GDP, slower nominal, slower investment, how big can that welfare loss be, and who listening right now loses?
Okay. The thing to always realize is that, roughly speaking, we think that the damage done by tariffs is not proportional to the tariff, it's proportional to the square of the tariff. So, a 20% tariff is something like 4 times as bad as a 10% tariff. Now, putting numbers to it, long run, it's funny thing. The long run impact of these tariffs is probably, it's going to be worse than Brexit. So in Brexit, we tend to think it was 3 or 4% of British GDP, maybe. This could easily be more than that, though there's a limit to it. It's hard to get. It's not, in itself, it's a serious hit to the economy. But the funny thing is, in the short run, it can be worse. And the reason it can be worse is the extreme uncertainty that we're creating. And so, once we, even with these high tariffs, we'll settle down eventually. Business will find ways to cope. Costs will be higher. GDP will be lower. But that's, we'll make that transition. But right now, if you, I can only imagine that a lot of manufacturing, managers are, if they aren't drinking, they're more power to them because they should be. Any move you make may turn out to be disastrous because God knows what the tariffs will be by the time the investment matures.
What you just heard there from Paul Krugman, folks, is absolutely critical. I want to translate it a little bit. He mentioned some math, the square of the tariff. This goes back to literally Newtonian physics. Think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, maybe exponential. 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. That's an exaggeration, but you get the idea. Paul, let's bring it right over to America. Are we going to have a square of the unemployment rate? Are we going to see different labor metrics, including the 4.x unemployment rate, explode higher?
Okay, I think we will, but that's not in the long run. That's the thing. Tariffs, what is the impact of tariffs on the unemployment rate under normal conditions? And the answer is not much. It makes labor less efficient, but it doesn't cause a slump. It just means that people do different things. They do worse things, but they stay employed. So that it's not really the unemployment rate. It's productivity that will suffer. It's real incomes that will suffer in the long run. But we may very well now, I think better than even odds, that we are going to have a recession this year, which is not the standard effect of tariffs. Normally, if you ask me, do tariffs cause recessions? I would say no. The whole story about Smoot-Hawley caused the Great Depression, that's basically a wrong story. Smoot-Hawley was a bad thing, but not for that reason. But the uncertainty, which means that if you invest, should you invest more in your Mexican components plant? Well, not if we're going to have 25% tariffs on Mexico. Should you invest in U.S. production instead? Not if those tariffs might not stay in place and you really wish that you had invested in Mexico. Right. So there's going to be a lot of just playing cash sitting on the sidelines while businesses wait for some clarity, which it doesn't seem to be coming anytime soon.
Professor, it was just as recently as the beginning of the year that Tom and I were having discussions with our guests here in Bloomberg Surveillance about U.S. economic exceptionalism. Boy, that seems quaint now. Is that still the case here? How do you think about that vis-a-vis U.S. and the rest of the world?
Well, if you wanted to kill U.S. exceptionalism, this is kind of what you would do, right? There's much more. It's not just the tariffs, but yeah, the U.S. from about 2000 on, the U.S. had much faster productivity growth than other advanced countries. We just outperformed, and we also had somewhat better demography than other advanced countries. So we just had a much better growth picture than anyone else in the advanced world. All of a sudden, we're disrupting our trade, although we're disrupting other people's as well. That's a bad thing. Should bear in mind that in the background, this isn't the only radical departure in policy that the Trump administration is pursuing. Look at what is happening to scientific research. Enormous cuts in mass layoffs. The CDC is laying off medical scientists so fast that they're actually that samples are being left in freezers with nobody to look after them. And since ultimately U.S. technological progress relies a lot on the spillovers from government research, we're actually crippling. Make America not great again. This is really amazing.
Paul Krugman with us. He continues with us, the laureate. Of course, I can't say enough. This moment you're in America, the questions you have in the living room, the kitchen table. This is what Krugman was weaned on years ago at Yale and on to Princeton as well. Look to his Substack out. I can't say enough about it. I really subscribe to that as a huge value add. Paul Krugman, I've got to go over, and I guess this goes Mundell and on to Jacob Frenkel and Ken Rogoff and the rest, to the currency. You studied under the guy who invented modern foreign exchange, Rudiger Dornbusch. We lost him tragically years ago of cancer. What would Rudy Dornbusch say right now, or Paul Krugman say, about the idea that China's solution is to depreciate the renminbi?
Well, yeah. Rudy would have some choice phrases that would be more colorful than anything I can come up with. But this is look, if one of the things we've done is we've displaced China as being the prime bad actor in the world economy. China has been a bad actor. They have kept an undervalued currency. They have failed. China has a problem, which is they don't consume enough. They have excess saving. They're running out of investment opportunities at home. They've tried to close that gap, to square that circle by running big trade surpluses, which they can do because capital controlled an undervalued currency, but the blowback from that has been growing. Even, if Trump weren't there, if we had a sane person as president of the United States, that sane person would be taking a very hard line on China because the Chinese are in fact not good They're not team players in the world economy. And the Chinese are still trying to do that, which is insane because it's the United States clearly, is not going to be a market, and the Europeans, the rest of the world is not going to take their stuff either. So they are not helping.
Right. Paul, one final question, and it's a fun question because the Republicans love to go after you. There's a primal scream, including the senator from Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren, and others. Republicans, do something. You're at a breakfast coffee with Thune of the Dakotas this morning in the Senate. What do you tell John Thune to do?
Yeah, I mean, look, all of this is happening because Congress ceded control over trade policy to the president. They did it a long time ago. They did it more than 50 years ago. And because presidents were assumed to be more interested in the international position of the United States than individual Congress people would be. Congress can take that back. And there's actually a lot of bipartisan support for that. I think people in Congress, they're not idiots. Not all of them are idiots anyway. They do realize that this is crazy. And all they need to do really is restore, make trade policy like the rest of policy, something that Congress has to vote on. There are reasons why we didn't do that, but now Trump might veto a change in legislation, but that would put him on the spot, and if necessary, overrule him. Just make this take away his authority to do this crazy stuff.
Okay, Paul, we got to leave it at that. Thank you for starting a morning with us. Paul Sweeney and the whole team thank Paul Krugman for his effort. Look to his Substack, which is really lighting up. I can't say enough about it. It's really it's more heated than it was with the New York Times for those of you that love and disagree with Professor Krugman.